Well, I think that's really a very hard act to follow for the rest of us for this afternoon. But, Al Gore really talked about the fact that we needed to step up, and I just want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the things that PRI is doing over the next year or so, and some of the things we're launching at this conference that are really designed to help our signatories take those steps and take that action that, as Mr. Gore said, is needed now. And I think one of the things that's fantastic about the work that Al Gore has done for so long is that he really keeps pointing us towards uncomfortable truths and realities. And, in 2006 he said that these were, he really labelled them as inconvenient truths, but now they're simply just unavoidable ones. And of course, while we're here at this conference, and a lot of speakers have already talked about all of the strange weather patterns that have been happening, from fires to floods, and we've been talking about things that are travelling on their way from over in Florida, etc. And we're seeing really that the weather, the things that scientists have told us 10, 15, 20 years ago, that are definitely going to be happening, we see them now just playing out in front of our eyes. And all of these climate impacts are increasingly making themselves known. And I think this reality really has to loom large over this conference and over the GCAS conference that's taking place besides and alongside PRI in person, because action and urgency really has to be the message of the day. So at PRI, we really take the whole issue of the Paris Agreement and its goal to limit warming to well below 2 degrees really seriously. We know, however, as Al Gore said, that the current national commitments to the Paris Agreement are expected to result in warming closer to 3 degrees. We also know that we need to be targeting warming much closer to 1.5 degrees if we're to avoid the worst effects of climate change. And unfortunately, most of the available evidence and most of the available modelling shows us that we're on track for warming between 2.6 and 4 degrees. So the numbers just really don't match up. So here and now in 2018, despite the fact that we know that there is a growing misalignment in these numbers, the world is not moving at the speed and at the pace and with the urgency that's required. And for institutional investors, those of you who really hold in trust most of the world's savings, you have to think about the fact that if we don't have more action, that you're going to face a future of financial world where volatility and value destruction resulting from climate change may well become the norm. And unlike a decade ago, when the global financial crisis hit, we're not going to be able to say that we didn't know, we couldn't see it coming, or that we didn't have time to prepare, because all of these things we do know. And our signatories tell us that climate is the number one issue, the most urgent issue that's on their radar. It's an issue that they're grappling with, and it's the number one issue that they want more assistance and guidance from the PRI on. But needing to do more really struck me this year when I was in Germany at COP23. And I really came away from that conference with a great sense of despair, as despite all the fantastic things that were showcased from investors, from business, from governments, we walked away knowing that global emissions had gone up. So when I came back from that conference, I really spoke to the team to say, well, what are we going to do? Because obviously the action that is happening isn't making enough of a contribution. We know signatories want more from us, but what is it that we need to do? What are the tools that we can give to our signatories? But again, it was really clear that we did need to, as Al was referring to, that we needed to step up and we needed to do more to provide signatories with guidance and tools. So after sitting down with the team, we then went and consulted with a whole lot of other organisations. We spoke to leaders in the climate field, but we also spoke to a whole lot of economists as well. And with the assistance of the ClimateWorks Foundation, who provided us with a small grant, we partnered with energy transition advisors and with Vivid Economics. And we started scoping the investment implications of a rapid and forceful policy response to close the gap to the Paris Agreement. Because we believe that as things currently stand, that there are really only two pathways to avoid the damage of runaway climate change. Either we see the Paris Agreement aligned investments and we see Paris Agreement aligned action today, or that there'll have to be a late attempt to put the world back on track and onto a safe path. At some point in the future, we believe that an inevitable policy response to ratchet up global action is going to be required. That's if we don't see that strong action, if we don't see it forthcoming now, if we don't see it with the urgency that we need. And we know that it's going to be disruptive. And we say it's inevitable because the realities of climate change threaten to affect your investment returns, reduce the insurable market, and put intense pressure on policymakers for change as well, as more and more citizens in the world demand change. And that's why with energy transition advisors and with Vivid Economics, we've developed a series of thought leadership papers, but also of technical papers that set out why a forceful climate policy response is probable without much of that stronger action that I talked about from investors, from companies, and from governments. We've also set out in these papers when, what it means, and how it could unfold. And we've undertaken analysis around the implications for strategic asset allocation and portfolio construction, and what investor actions are needed to adequately prepare. So providing signatories with the guidance that they need on how to really go about aligning their investment activities with the Paris Agreement are some of our highest priorities. As despite all of the collective action, as I said, that's happening, enough is not happening with the urgency. And we have to keep that in our mind. We need to act now, but with urgency. But we can provide all the tools to you, but at the end of the day, ultimately as investors, you will each need to decide what action that you're going to take within your own organisations to address climate change and the risk to your own portfolios. But we strongly believe that by taking stronger action now, you can both prepare your portfolio for safe climate outcomes and you can contribute to lessening the need for an inevitable policy response. So what we hope really to get across at this conference, and by releasing the IPR papers and the technical papers that we're putting out, is we hope that we really do get across that urgency, but we hope that we can give you the tools that you need to act as well. So in conclusion, and just before we hear from our panel, and on our panel we've got some fantastic leaders who are doing fantastic things. We just need many more of them. We need many more of you in this room to be showing the leadership that's required. So I just want to leave you with the quote that I quite like when I'm thinking about the dilemmas of climate. And it's from a French-Canadian astrophysicist, and his name's Hubert Reeves. But he said that man is the most insane species, that he worships an invisible God and destroys a visible nature, unaware that the nature that he is destroying is the God that he is worshipping. And I think we all need to be doing more to protect the visible nature. So now I'd like to just leave you with that and hand over to Martin for the next panel, which, as I said, I hope we will see some really inspiring leadership from. Thank you.